Okay, so picture this, right? It's like a perfect afternoon in a park in LA. Like kids are playing and there are seniors chatting on benches and joggers. It's just like a totally chill California scene.
Sounds idyllic.
Yeah, totally. But there's this one detail that kind of throws things off. There's this guy sitting on a bench, just reading a book, normal stuff.
Right.
Except he's wearing this bright red Magier hat.
Okay. I see where this is going. Like how one little thing can change the whole vibe.
Exactly. And that's where Karen comes in. She's walking through the park, sees the guy in the hat, and you can just tell she's like not happy about it.
It's interesting how certain objects can become like symbols, representing all these complex ideas. Like that hat probably triggers a lot of different feelings for people, positive or negative.
Yeah, for sure. And Karen, she doesn't hesitate. Like she whips out her phone and dials 911, claims the guy's suspicious and making everyone uncomfortable.
Oh, wow. So like right away, she's jumping to conclusions.
Pretty much. And of course, people start gathering, right? Drawn by the whole commotion. Some are just curious, some look confused, and then others seem to be on Karen's side. Like they agree with her.
That's a classic example of what they call the fundamental attribution error.
But what now?
It's this cognitive bias, right? It means people tend to like judge other people's actions based on their personality. Like they assume it's just who they are instead of thinking about the situation or anything.
So like with Karen, she's seeing the hat and just assuming it says everything about this guy's character.
Exactly. It's like she's making this judgment with like zero information and a ton of pre-existing bias.
And the whole park is getting more and more tense as the crowd grows.
Yeah.
And the police show up, and even they seem kind of thrown by the whole thing.
I bet. So what happened next?
Well, the real kicker is the man in the hat, it's Elon Musk.
No way. Really?
Yeah. Talk about irony.
Oh.
You have like one of the biggest innovators in the world, known for pushing boundaries and all that, and he's being judged for a hat. The crowd is totally speechless. Karen's just frozen there. And even the officers, trying to stay professional, they clearly recognize him too. Like everyone's just taken aback.
That's just wild. Like 1 minute you're reading a book, next minute you're in the middle of like a viral incident.
Yeah.
It just shows how fast things can get blown out of proportion.
And Karen, trying to control the situation, she actually loses control completely. And Elon, he's surprisingly calm, just asks her this simple question. He's like, did you judge me by the hat or the person wearing it?
Ooh, that's a good one. Like, boom, puts the spotlight right on her and her actions. It forces her and everyone watching to think about their own biases.
For sure. And you can just feel the whole energy shift. The crowd was kind of with Karen at first, but now they're starting to turn on her.
Yeah, it's like public opinion can change in a heartbeat.
Totally. Now everyone's whispering and murmuring, and you can see Karen feeling the weight of it all. She ends up just leaving, totally humiliated. So then Elon turns to address the crowd. Everyone's hanging on his every word.
I can only imagine. So what did he say? It's pretty amazing to see how the whole atmosphere in the park changes, right? Like it started as this confrontation, all based on snap judgments, and now it's turned into this moment where everyone's kind of reflecting.
Yeah, it's wild. And Elon, he totally uses this as a chance to start a deeper conversation. He's talking about how, looks can be deceiving and how we all need to check our own biases.
That's a powerful message. I bet a lot of people in that crowd were really feeling it.
Oh, yeah, you could definitely tell. Like the mood shifted completely. It was like the whole incident made them rethink things. Like it shook them out of their normal routines.
Right. Like it reminds us how important it is to have those nuanced conversations. Something we don't really do enough these days. It's so easy to get stuck in those echo chambers.
Yeah.
Surrounded by people who think just like us.
Yeah, for sure. But real growth, it usually comes from hearing different perspectives, right? And being open to maybe being wrong about some things.
Totally. And it's not just about having the conversation. It's about how we have them. Like, even though Elon's being publicly judged here, he's staying calm and responding thoughtfully. He doesn't get defensive.
Yeah, he's a good example of how to handle a tough conversation without making things worse. Instead of getting angry, he asks Karen that question to make her think.
Exactly. It's such a good example of how to be constructive even when things are difficult.
It's funny, though, like even with all this tension, this little kid walks up to Elon and asks him why he wore the hat.
Oh, that's sweet. Like, he's so curious. He wants to understand why Elon would do something that might cause this kind of reaction.
For sure. Kids are always watching how adults handle these situations. So what did Elon say?
He basically said he wore the hat to make people think. Like, to encourage them to look beyond just symbols and really think critically about ideas. He knows it's going to be uncomfortable sometimes, but he thinks it's important to have these tough conversations.
So he's kind of using himself and the hat as a way to start this bigger discussion about bias and assumptions.
Exactly. It's pretty bold, and it definitely got people talking, both there in the park and online.
Oh yeah, speaking of online, this thing didn't stay in that park. Someone posted a video and it went viral, like instantly. Now everyone's talking about it and arguing.
Ah, yes, the world of instant opinions and hot takes. That's where that idea of virtue signaling comes in, right?
Abuse signaling, what's that?
It's when people say or do things just to show how morally good they are, like to get approval from others, not because they really care about the issue that much.
Oh, I get it. So like some people commenting on the video, they might not actually care that much. They just want to be on the right side.
Exactly. Social media really encourages that kind of performative activism. People feel like they have to express certain views to fit in or avoid getting criticized, and it just stops people from engaging with, all the sides of an issue.
Makes sense. It's also interesting how different news outlets are covering it. Some are all about the drama of the confrontation. Others are like analyzing the whole thing, talking about the psychology of it all.
Right. Textbook media bias. Different outlets tailor their stories to fit their audience and what they believe.
So even though it's the same event, people might end up with totally different ideas about what happened, depending on where they get their news.
Yeah, for sure. That's why it's so important to be media literate, like to really think critically about the information we're taking in and consider the source, who's telling the story and why.
That's a good point. And this isn't just about Elon or Karen. It's about all of us, how we deal with these complicated issues, our own biases, and just how we talk to each other.
Absolutely. This whole thing might seem like just one random event, but it really reflects bigger trends we see in society. It shows how common snap judgments are, how much power symbols have, and the role of social media in shaping how we think. And it also highlights how important it is to have those more thoughtful, empathetic conversations.
Man, this whole deep dive has really got me thinking. We started with this like random park incident, and now we're talking about all this big stuff like bias and social media and how we talk to each other.
It's crazy, right? Like one event can just open up this whole window into these bigger trends. And it's not just about seeing them, it's about figuring out how we can actually deal with them, like on a personal level.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like it could
Yeah.
feel kind of overwhelming, right? Trying to change these huge systemic issues.
Yeah, it's easy to feel helpless.
Yeah.
But I think, honestly, the first step is just admitting that we all have biases. Yeah, like we're constantly being bombarded with information, and our brains have to find shortcuts to process it all. And those shortcuts, they can lead to stereotypes and prejudices, even if we don't even realize it.
So you're saying like even if we think we're open-minded, we all have these hidden biases.
Pretty much. And once we accept that, then we can start to be more aware of how those biases might be affecting us, like our thoughts and judgments and actions.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually catch ourselves doing that? Like when those biases are taking over?
It's all about self-reflection. Like, pay attention to your gut reactions. If you have a really strong feeling about something, especially a negative one, just stop for a second and ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Like, what am I assuming about this person or this situation? Am I basing this on facts or just my own preconceived notions?
It's like hitting the pause button on your brain before you jump to conclusions.
Exactly. That pause can be so helpful. It gives you a chance to step back from all the emotion and really think things through.
So instead of just reacting, you take a breath, question your assumptions, and try to see things from different angles.
Totally. And that doesn't mean you have to agree with everyone or say it's okay if you see something you think is wrong. It's about understanding that things aren't always black and white. People are complex.
It's about being curious instead of judgmental.
Yes. And it's something you have to keep working at. We're all constantly learning and changing how we see the world. It's a process.
This deep dive has really shown me how important it is to not only challenge my own biases, but also to be open to having those tough conversations.
For sure. We got to be willing to talk to people who see things differently.
Yeah.
Not to try and win an argument, but to really try and understand where they're coming from. Those conversations, even if they're uncomfortable, they're the only way we're going to bridge those divides and build a society where everyone feels like they belong.
And maybe those conversations can happen anywhere, right? Like in a park on a sunny afternoon. All started by a simple question. Did you judge me by the hat or the person wearing it?
That's a question we should all keep in mind, not just when we're online or watching the news, but in our everyday lives too. It reminds us that understanding takes effort, it takes compassion, and it takes looking deeper than just the surface. And on that note, that's a wrap for this deep dive, folks. We'll catch you on the next one.